Rain blurred the lights of Boston into trembling rivers of gold as Ellie Carter pressed a cracked phone to her ear. She was 18, exhausted, and sitting on the edge of a narrow bed beside the steady wheeze of her father's oxygen tank. The bills on the counter mocked her in silence. Her mother was gone, her father half paralyzed, and she had just dropped out of school to keep them alive. Her laptop screen glowed with a desperate search egg donation clinic, quick cash near me. The first result showed a phone number beneath a smiling stock photo of nurses. She did not check the fine print. She only pressed call. On the other end, in a glass office, high above the city, Dr. Adrian Vale, 34, was closing patient files. The founder of Vale Medical Foundation, he was brilliant, wealthy, and solitary. He had not touched another person outside of surgery since the night his fiancée died on his operating table 5 years ago. When his private line rang, he frowned. Vale Medical, Dr. Vale speaking. Ellie froze. Hi, I found this number online. Do you still pay for donations? Donations, his brow furrowed. For what exactly? Egg donations, she whispered. Please, I need $10,000. My dad's treatment, he's dying, and the hospital said no charity this time. Adrian's tone hardened. That's illegal. Who gave you this number? I don't know, I just typed it in. Please, you're a doctor, right? Doctors help people. He looked out at the rain veiling the skyline. The girl's voice trembled between courage and collapse. Listen, he said carefully. This isn't what you think. You need the hospital's social worker, not me. Her breath hitched. They already said no. Please, I'm not asking for free. I can work clean anything, just save him. The plea cracked through the armor he had built around himself. He rubbed his temple. I'm sorry, Miss Carter. Ellie Carter. Miss Carter, I can't. The line went dead. He sat still for a long time, the echo of her voice caught between the hum of machines. Outside, thunder rolled over the Charles River. He told himself it was nonsense, another scam or mistake. But an hour later, while reviewing call logs, he found himself replaying her voice. Please, I'll do anything. It did not sound like a lie. Against reason, he typed a message. If you're in real trouble, come to the hospital's main entrance. Ask for me. It was supposed to be a warning, not an invitation. Yet when he looked up from his paperwork near midnight, a security call came through. Dr. Vale, there's a girl downstairs asking for you. Says you told her to come. His pulse stumbled. Describe her. Young, maybe 18. Soaked to the bone. Looks like she hasn't eaten. For the first time in years, he left his office mid-shift. The lobby lights were harsh against the storm-dark glass. And there she was, small, trembling strands of wet hair stuck to her face. She held a plastic grocery bag with a pair of shoes and a folded letter. Are you Dr. Vale? She asked, voice breaking. He stopped a few steps away. You're the girl from the call. She nodded once. You said, if I needed real help. He almost said he hadn't meant it, but the words wouldn't come. Her eyes were wide hollow with fatigue, yet stubborn with hope. You shouldn't be here, he said softly. It's late. I didn't know where else to go. Her body swayed, and before he could think, he caught her. The contact jolted him like a defibrillator. She was ice-cold, shivering through soaked clothes. Come on, he murmured, steadying her weight. Let's get you warm. I'm sorry, she whispered. If this is wrong, I'll leave. No, he said after a pause that surprised even him. Just sit down. She sank into the nearest bench, clutching the towel the guard handed her. Her lips trembled. I didn't mean to bother anyone. I just wanted to save him. Your father, Adrian said quietly. Yes. He crouched in front of her, the rain still dripping from his sleeves. He should have walked away. He should have followed protocol. But looking at her thin shoulders drawn tight against the cold, he remembered another face on another table and how it felt to fail. He exhaled slowly. You didn't bother anyone. She met his eyes for the first time. Then why do you look like you're in pain? He did not answer. The elevator chimed softly behind them, and in that fragile silence, something unseen shifted between two strangers, a doctor who refused to touch, and a girl who had nothing left to lose. He straightened, motioning for the guard to bring a blanket. What's your name again, Ellie? She said. Ellie Carter. He nodded once. All right, Ellie Carter, let's start with a meal, then we'll talk. As he led her through the sterile corridor, his hand hovered just behind her back, not quite touching, afraid yet drawn. For the first time in 5 years, Adrian Vale felt the pulse of his own heart return. A single wrong number had crossed the line between logic and fate, and neither of them knew that by morning their lives would never be the same. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the quiet kitchen of the staff dormitory behind Vale Medical Center. The storm had passed, but the city still smelled of rain. Ellie Carter sat at the small metal table, wearing borrowed scrubs that were a size too large, her hair tied in a shaky ponytail. She stirred her oatmeal without tasting it, glancing every few seconds toward the hallway, where Dr. Adrian Vale had disappeared hours earlier. He had let her stay the night in a spare room, insisting it was temporary. Now, as the coffee machine hummed, she tried to memorize every detail, as if she might wake up and find it gone. Her phone screen was cracked, her bank account empty, and the hospital still waiting for payment on her father's treatment. She could barely breathe beneath the weight of it. In his office upstairs, Adrian read the morning headlines and pushed the paper aside. He had tried to rationalize last night as an act of duty, but something about that girl lingered in his mind, the defiance in her trembling voice, the way she had apologized for needing help. It stirred something he thought he had lost. Still, he had a reputation to protect. He walked down to the staff wing, expecting to find her gone. But there she was, sitting straight, like a student awaiting instruction. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. I told you last night was temporary. She looked up, her eyes tired but clear. I'll leave if you want, but please, just give me a chance to work. I can clean file anything, I don't need charity. Her words hit him harder than he expected. This is a hospital, not a job agency, he said. I don't have a position for you. Then make one, she replied. Her voice trembled, but she didn't look away. You're a doctor, you save lives. Saving mine would just mean giving me something to do. For a moment he saw the reflection of his younger self, the stubborn intern who once begged for a chance before losing everything. He exhaled slowly. Fine, 3 days. You help the admin staff with records. After that, you find somewhere else to go. Relief washed over her face, so pure that he had to look away. Thank you, Dr. Vale. It's Adrian, he said before he could stop himself. Dr. Vale is for patients. She nodded, clutching the paper badge he handed her like a lifeline. That afternoon, she sorted files in the archive room, moving with quiet precision. Her fingertips brushed faded folders, marked with dates and names people whose lives had passed through these walls. The work was simple, but every heartbeat of the machines outside reminded her of her father lying alone in another ward across the city. When she finally stopped to rest, she caught her reflection in the glass. She looked older than 18. Too much worry, too little time. Upstairs, Adrian watched her through the observation window. She didn't notice him. She was humming softly, a habit of nervous people. Something about her gentleness unsettled him. He had spent years surrounding himself with sterile order, and here was this fragile force, rearranging it with nothing but quiet persistence. Later that evening, he found her asleep at the desk, a pile of neatly stacked files beside her. Her hands were still curled around a pen. He stood there for a long moment, then covered her with his coat. When she woke, she panicked, standing abruptly. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to fall asleep." "You organized a month's worth of records in one day," he said. "No apology necessary." Her cheeks flushed. "I just needed to keep busy." He studied her for a moment. "When was the last time you ate properly? I don't remember." "Then that's our next priority." They sat in the cafeteria where the night staff trickled in and out. She hesitated before taking her first bite. "You're not eating?" she asked. He shrugged. "I usually don't at this hour." "Then you'll get sick too," she murmured. The simplicity of her concern disarmed him. "You talk like someone twice your age." "Life makes you older," she said quietly. For a while they ate in silence, broken only by the distant hum of medical equipment. Then she asked softly, "Do you ever get tired of saving people?" He looked at her, unsure how to answer. "Sometimes," he said finally. "Not because they don't deserve it, but because sometimes they don't want to be saved." "My dad does," she said. "He just needs time." Her voice cracked at the edges, but her resolve held. He admired that. When they finished, he handed her a key card. "There's an empty staff dorm next to the lab. It's safer than the street." "You don't have to, I know." He interrupted. "But I am." She hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you, Dr. Adrian." As she left, the echo of her footsteps followed him long after she was gone. That night, he opened her background check routine procedure. Nothing personal, he told himself. High school honors, accepted to a nursing program. Dropped out 6 months ago after her mother's death. No criminal record, no deception. Just a girl trying to keep her father alive in a world that charged by the hour for compassion. He closed the file, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling. For years, his life had been measured by surgeries and statistics. Now one wrong number had introduced a variable he could not control. Meanwhile, Ellie lay awake in the small dorm room, listening to the hum of the air conditioner and the distant rhythm of the city. She thought about her father's frail hand, squeezing hers, the promises she made, and the stranger who had saved her twice, in one night first from the rain, then from despair. She whispered into the dark, half prayer, half confession. If love can't save him, maybe money will. And somewhere down the hall, as if he heard it through the walls, Adrian Vale lay awake too, staring at the same ceiling, feeling something stir in a heart he had long forgotten to feel. The following week settled into a fragile rhythm neither of them expected. Ellie Carter arrived at the hospital before dawn, her ponytail damp from the morning mist, her eyes steady even after sleepless nights. She learned to navigate the maze of corridors, fetching reports, filing test results, and greeting patients with a smile that reached further than any medicine. The nurses liked her immediately. She remembered everyone's name. The patients did too. In a place where time meant money, Ellie made people feel human again. Dr. Adrian Vale noticed. He noticed the way she steadied an elderly man's hands when he trembled, signing discharge papers, or how she left small notes that read, "You're stronger than yesterday," on patient trays. For someone who had come begging for money, she gave more of herself than anyone on staff. One afternoon, while reviewing charts, Adrian found her standing by the pediatric ward window, watching the snow fall. She didn't hear him approach. "You know those kids think you're a magician," he said quietly. She turned, startled, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "I just tell them stories about stars and lungs and how both need space to shine." Her words lingered. He studied her face in the pale light. She looked younger when she smiled, like the world hadn't beaten her down completely. "You shouldn't be here after hours," he said, but the reprimand lacked conviction. "Neither should you," she replied. "Doctors need rest too." "I don't sleep much," he admitted. "Dreams don't agree with me." "Then maybe you're dreaming the wrong things." That night he couldn't forget her words. For the first time in years, he wondered if exhaustion could be cured by something other than caffeine and guilt. Over the next few days, their paths crossed more often. She began assisting in small administrative tasks near his office. He pretended not to notice that her handwriting was neater than his, that she remembered every patient's story, or that the sound of her voice softened even the hardest hours. Late one evening, as he prepared to leave, he found her sitting outside the supply room, head resting on her knees. "Are you all right?" he asked. She nodded, though her lips trembled. "I just got off the phone with the insurance office. They denied my dad's request again. They said his condition isn't critical enough." "That's absurd," Adrian muttered. "He's half paralyzed. They said there's no budget left for charity care." She forced a smile. "I guess he's not dying fast enough." The bitterness in her tone startled him. He crouched down beside her. "I'll call them tomorrow." "You don't have to, I want to." Their eyes met in the dim hallway light. Something unspoken passed between them, fragile but undeniable. When she looked away, her eyes glistened. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me. You make that sound like a rare thing." "It is," she said. The next morning he did call, and somehow the paperwork that had been impossible was suddenly expedited. Ellie found out at lunch. She ran to his office, nearly out of breath. "They approved it," she said, tears bright in her eyes. "They said the payment will be delayed, but the treatment continues." "Good," he said, pretending to stay composed. "I'm glad. You did this, didn't you?" He didn't answer, but she smiled through her tears. "You don't have to be modest, I know." He turned away, but her laughter followed him out the door. In the days that followed, the cold doctor everyone feared began to change. The staff whispered that he smiled more, that he no longer barked orders. No one realized the reason was a girl half his age, who reminded him what compassion felt like. One evening, while reorganizing a cabinet, Ellie sliced her hand on a broken glass vial. She gasped, blood welling on her palm. Adrian was across the hall. He rushed over before she could hide it. "Hold still." He grabbed gauze and antiseptic. "It's fine," she protested. "It's nothing. It's not nothing." His voice was sharper than intended, the sound of a man who had lost too many people. He gently wrapped her hand, his fingers brushing her skin. The contact froze them both. His touch was steady, precise, yet something in it trembled. He looked up, meeting her eyes. The world around them blurred the hum of machines, the whisper of rain outside, the scent of alcohol and soap. "Does it hurt?" he asked softly. "Only when you stop," she murmured before realizing what she'd said. He froze, eyes searching hers, then quickly stepped back. "You should be more careful." "Yes, doctor," she said, smiling faintly. The tension lingered long after he left. That night, he couldn't focus on his notes. Every time he tried, he saw the way she had looked at him. Equal parts fear and trust. Around midnight, he walked past her dorm and saw the light still on. She was sitting at the desk sketching something. "You should be asleep," he said from the doorway. She jumped, then laughed nervously. "You scared me. I was just drawing. You draw only when I'm anxious." He stepped closer. On the paper was a small heart made of glass, catching light through faint watercolor strokes. "That's good," he said. "It's fragile but clear." She smiled. "That's the point. You can see right through it." He looked at her, something soft, flickering behind his guarded eyes. The next day, she found a small box on her desk. Inside was a glass heart pendant on a thin silver chain. A note in careful handwriting read, "For courage." She wore it immediately. When he saw it around her neck later that morning, he said nothing, only turned away, with a faint smile he couldn't hide. As the winter deepened, the walls between them thinned. She brought warmth into sterile corridors. He brought protection into her uncertain world. Neither dared to name what was growing, but both felt it quiet, steady, like a pulse beneath the skin. Somewhere between kindness and longing, the untouchable doctor and the girl with nothing left to lose began to learn what it meant to heal. Winter pressed harder against Boston, layering the hospital windows with frost that caught the morning light like broken glass. Inside the Vale Medical Center, warmth hummed from machines and quiet footsteps, and somewhere between them, Ellie Carter's laughter drifted like a secret melody no one knew they needed. She had been there for a month now, officially an assistant under temporary contract, though everyone knew it was Adrian Vale's silent decision that kept her name on the roster. He told himself it was because she was useful, efficient, disciplined. But deep down he knew the truth. He couldn't imagine the building without her. She had become part of its rhythm, like sunlight that found its way through drawn blinds. He watched her one morning through the glass wall of his office as she adjusted IV tubes for a recovering patient. Her movements were gentle, precise, unhurried. When she smiled, the man smiled too, and for the first time in years, Adrian felt envy, not of the smile itself, but of the ability to give it. He turned back to his chart, but the words blurred. Later that afternoon, Ellie came in with a clipboard, cheeks flushed from rushing through the cold. "You missed lunch again," she said, setting down a sandwich. He frowned. "I don't eat during rounds." "Then maybe that's why you look like you haven't slept in a decade." She smiled, teasing lightly, but the worry in her tone was real. He raised an eyebrow. "You talk to your boss like this often." "Only when my boss forgets he's human," she replied. For a moment their eyes held, and he forgot how to breathe. She left before he could answer, and her scent, clean faintly of soap and lavender, stayed behind. That evening he found her in the empty lecture hall, reading from a textbook. "You're studying?" he asked. She startled, then smiled sheepishly. "Trying to remember what it felt like to be a student. You were accepted into nursing school, right? I was. Then my mom died and my dad got sick. The bills were more than our rent, so I traded textbooks for hospital forms." "You could still go back," he said. "Maybe," she said softly, "but I think life gives second chances to those who've earned them. I'm not there yet." He didn't know why, but those words pierced him. After she left, he stood by the chalkboard, staring at her handwriting, small notes she'd made while studying, and he felt something unfamiliar longing. The next day they worked side by side in the ICU. A child with a heart defect needed observation, and Ellie's empathy calmed the terrified mother better than any prescription could. When the woman left, Adrian said quietly, "You'd make a good nurse." "You mean if I stop talking so much?" she teased. "No," he said, "because you listen." The silence that followed felt fragile, like glass about to sing. That night she found a small folder on her desk, copies of her old nursing transcripts and an application form. In the corner, a note in Adrian's careful handwriting, "You're ready now." She pressed the paper to her chest, tears welling up. The next morning she knocked on his office door. "You did this." He didn't look up from his screen. "You did. I just reminded you. You believe in me that much. I believe in facts. You're capable." "That's a fact," she smiled. "You're terrible at taking compliments." "So I've been told." As she turned to leave, he said quietly, "Ellie." She paused. "If you need help with the application, I'll review it." "Why? Because good people deserve a chance?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you, Adrian." Hearing his name on her lips made his pulse stutter. That evening a storm swept through the city. She stayed late to help inventory supplies, and the power flickered twice. When it finally went out, the emergency lights bathed the hallways in red. She called out softly, "Adrian." He appeared a moment later with a flashlight. "Backup generators will kick in soon. Are you all right?" "Fine, just a little dark." "Stay here," he said, leading her into his office. The faint glow from his desk lamp painted shadows on his face. For the first time, she saw the exhaustion he hid behind precision. "Do you ever go home?" she asked. "This is home," he said simply. "That sounds lonely." "It's safe," he corrected. "No one gets hurt when you don't let them close. But no one gets saved either." Her words hung between them. He turned away, the muscle in his jaw tightening. "You think saving people makes you happy?" "No," she said. "I think saving people makes you human." He laughed softly, not mocking but wounded. "You sound like her," he murmured. "Who's someone I failed?" She stepped closer. "You don't have to tell me, but you should forgive yourself." He met her gaze. "Forgiveness doesn't change the outcome." "Maybe not," she whispered, "but it changes you." Their eyes locked in the half-light, and the distance between them disappeared for a heartbeat. She reached out, touching his wrist. He didn't move away. Her fingers were warm against his skin. The world outside vanished, the storm, the city, the rules. Then slowly he drew back, his breath unsteady. "You should rest," he said. She nodded, embarrassed, though her heart was pounding. The next morning, she pretended nothing had happened, but something had shifted. The nurses whispered about how the usually cold Dr. Vale had smiled. During rounds, about how he'd stayed late to cover for her paperwork. Days later, she was walking through the main hall when she slipped on a wet tile, dropping her files. He appeared, instantly steadying her. Papers scattered everywhere, their hands brushed as they picked them up. "It was nothing and everything." She laughed nervously. "I think the universe is trying to kill me." "Not while I'm around," he said, voice low. Their hands lingered a second longer than necessary. That night she cut her palm again while unpacking supplies. He caught her wrist, dabbing the blood with gentle precision. "Does it hurt?" he asked. "Only when you stop," she whispered, echoing their first accident. His eyes met hers, and something inside him cracked open. Without a word, he opened a drawer, pulled out a small velvet box, and handed it to her. Inside lay the glass heart pendant she had painted weeks before. "For courage," he said. She looked up, tears threatening to spill. "You kept it." "It reminded me that some things are worth breaking for." Her breath caught. She wanted to say something, anything, but words failed. He stepped back, retreating into the safety of silence. But she knew the truth now. The doctor who had sworn never to touch anyone had already touched her life in ways neither could undo. As the snow fell outside, Ellie Carter realized that the heart he had forgotten to feel was beginning to beat again, and she was the one who had awakened it. Spring arrived late in Boston, but the city still felt trapped in winter's shadow. Inside Vale Medical Center, whispers began to grow long before either of them noticed. It started innocently enough. Someone saw Ellie leaving Adrian's office. After hours, another noticed how he lingered near the nurse's station when she was around. By the time her name reached the staff lounge, the story had already twisted into something else. People said the cold-hearted billionaire doctor had finally fallen for his young assistant. They said she was only there because of him. Ellie didn't hear it at first. She worked through every shift, determined to prove her worth. But when she walked into the cafeteria one afternoon and the conversation went silent, she understood. Two nurses exchanged glances, one whispering, "Guess sleeping with the boss pays off." Her stomach turned. She dropped her tray and walked out, the words echoing in her chest. Upstairs, Adrian was in a board meeting when his assistant forwarded a link to an online gossip page. The headline made his blood run cold. Billionaire doctor and teenage employee spend nights together inside the hospital, romance that breaks every rule. Beneath it was a grainy photo taken through the window of his office. It showed Ellie handing him a cup of coffee, his hand brushing hers. The angle made it look intimate, deliberate. The accompanying article was worse. It accused him of ethical misconduct, implied coercion, and hinted that her father's treatment had been paid through him. "Is it true," one board member asked sharply, "you housed her, hired her without formal approval, and paid her father's bills?" "I paid his medical expenses through the foundation," Adrian said evenly. "Because the hospital refused, there was no personal exchange." "The public won't see it that way," another said. "You need to fix this before the media turns it into a scandal." "By lying," he snapped. "By managing perception," the chairman replied coldly. "We'll draft a statement denying any personal relationship. And for God's sake, keep her out of sight." "She's done nothing wrong," Adrian said. "This isn't about guilt," the man replied. "It's about optics." That night, Ellie was called into his office. She looked pale, her hands shaking slightly. "I saw the article," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "You didn't," he said. "They're trying to protect the hospital, not the truth. So what happens now?" "You'll need to step away for a while, until this dies down." Her eyes filled with tears. "You're firing me?" "No," he said quickly. "Just taking time off." "That's the same thing?" He stepped closer. "Ellie, listen to me. I'll handle this." "You can't," she said, her voice breaking. "You're a man they respect. I'm a poor girl who begged for money. Who do you think they'll believe?" He wanted to reach for her, but the cameras outside his door made him freeze. "I'm sorry," he whispered. She smiled weakly. "Don't be. You warned me about getting too close." She left before he could speak again. When he reached the window, she was already walking away, across the parking lot, her small figure swallowed by the rain. The next morning, news outlets had picked up the story. Headlines screamed, "Doctor under investigation for exploiting young employee." His board suspended him pending review. Security escorted him out of his own building. He walked past the same lobby where he had first met her, now filled with reporters shouting questions. "Is it true, Dr. Vale? Did you have a relationship with an underage girl?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. That night, his apartment felt colder than ever. He poured himself a drink and stared at the glass heart pendant lying on his desk. The reflection of the city lights flickered across its surface like a heartbeat fading away. He opened his phone and typed a message. "Don't disappear on me." He deleted it before sending. Across the city, Ellie sat in a small motel room, her father asleep beside her machines, humming quietly. The news played on the tiny TV, replaying his photo over and over. Every word cut deeper. She turned it off and took out a piece of paper. Her hand trembled as she wrote, "Dear Adrian, thank you for seeing me as more than what I sold." She left the note folded on the nightstand of the hospital dorm before disappearing. For weeks, the city forgot her name. Adrian's suspension became permanent, his reputation shattered. He refused interviews, ignored calls, and shut himself inside his apartment. Reporters called him a hypocrite, a predator, hiding behind philanthropy. He watched everything he built crumble in silence. Yet none of it hurt as much as her absence. Every morning he walked past her old desk, still covered in small sticky notes she used to leave for others. One read simply, "You can't save everyone, but you can try." He took it and slipped it into his coat pocket. One afternoon, his lawyer arrived with a contract. "They'll restore your license if you agree to a press campaign. You'll issue a public apology and marry into the board chairman's family, his daughter Veronica. It's damage control." Adrian stared at the paper. "You want me to fix my life by destroying someone else's?" "It's just an arrangement," the lawyer said. "You need stability. The foundation needs you back. Veronica's willing." He laughed bitterly. Love as a transaction. Fitting. That night he walked through the empty halls of his hospital one last time. In the corner of the staff lounge, the coffee mug Ellie had once given him still sat untouched. He picked it up, running a thumb along the faint crack near the rim. Outside, rain fell again, the same way it had the night she appeared. He remembered her eyes that first night, the way she had said, "You told me to come if I needed real help." He whispered to the empty room, "And I told you to stay safe." The next morning he signed the agreement. A week later, tabloids featured photos of him with Veronica smiling for cameras at a charity gala. The headlines read, "Disgraced Doctor Redeems Image Through Society Marriage." But when the flashes faded, his eyes stayed cold. Somewhere far from Boston, Ellie Carter folded hospital gowns in a small biotech lab in California, working night shifts to pay for her father's care. She never saw his photos, never heard his name again. She told herself it was better that way, that they belonged to different worlds. Yet every time she touched the glass heart at her neck, she remembered the man who gave it to her, not as a doctor, not as a savior, but as the only person who had ever looked at her and seen more. California was supposed to be a new beginning, but for Ellie Carter it felt more like exile. The air was dry, the sunsets too gold to be real, and every night the silence pressed heavier against her chest. She found work at a biotech research company called Pure Gene, a sleek facility built on promises of innovation and miracle cures. To the outside world, it looked like a place that saved lives. To Ellie, it was just another version of survival. She worked in the lower labs, cleaning instruments, labeling vials, and running data entries she didn't understand. The pay was barely enough to cover rent and her father's home care, but it was steady, and steady was all she needed. She told herself she wouldn't think about Adrian Vale. She deleted his number, ignored news alerts, avoided hospitals. Yet sometimes while sterilizing glass equipment, she'd see his reflection in her mind, focused, tired, impossibly gentle. It hurt less when she was busy, so she stayed busy. Weeks turned into months. Her supervisor, Dr. Meyer, was a thin man with restless eyes and a smile that never reached them. He praised her efficiency, told her she was promising. But the longer she worked there, the more she saw things that didn't feel right. There were patient samples labeled with numbers, not names. Files marked Human Trial Phase 0. One night, while sorting boxes in the cold room, she found a folder with her own initials, EC, printed on the corner. Inside was a consent form she had never signed, attached to lab notes about experimental serum tests. A chill ran through her. The next morning, she asked Dr. Meyer about it. He smiled thinly. "That's standard. Your data was collected during your employment physical." "I didn't agree to this," she said. "It's part of the confidentiality clause," he replied, voice flat. "Don't worry, you're helping science." That night she couldn't sleep. She felt dizzy, her skin clammy. She called the nurse managing her father's care to check on him, only to find the phone disconnected, her payments had bounced. Panic clawed at her chest. She went to work early the next morning to beg for an advance. Instead, Dr. Meyer handed her a cup of coffee and said, "You'll be compensated soon." "We're moving to the next stage of what she asked, but he didn't answer. The room spun, her vision tunneling. She stumbled, spilling the coffee. The last thing she saw before darkness swallowed her was the reflection of a syringe glinting in the fluorescent light. When she woke, she was in a hospital bed, tubes in her arm monitors beeping softly. A nurse smiled at her without meeting her eyes. "You're lucky," the woman said. "Most subjects don't wake this soon." "Subjects," Ellie whispered. "You're at Pure Gene's private facility," the nurse replied. "Rest now." But Ellie's body wouldn't obey. Every breath burned, every vein felt heavy. She tried to sit up, but her limbs trembled violently. She realized the truth: she hadn't been hired. She'd been chosen. Across the country, in a quiet Boston apartment, Adrian Vale lived in silence. His once spotless home was cluttered with unopened mail and half-drunk glasses of water. He had signed away his hospital rights and reputation, convinced himself that the price of peace was forgetting her. But peace never came. Some nights he dreamed of rain, of a girl standing in a hospital lobby whispering his name. Then one evening, while flipping through medical journals, a headline stopped him cold: "Pure Gene Biotech expands human trial program under new ownership." The photo beside it showed Veronica Vale smiling in front of a banner. Beneath the logo was the name of a chief lab technician, Dr. Meyer. Adrian froze. He remembered the same man from one of Veronica's investment meetings, a scientist she had called useful. The article mentioned a trial using unregistered human DNA data collected from lower-income participants. The location was California. He scrolled further and saw the words "unconscious female participant condition critical." No name was given, only an ID code EC. His pulse spiked. It could have been coincidence, but instinct told him otherwise. He opened his old laptop, hacked into the hospital registry, and traced the ID. It matched Ellie Carter's employment record. The world around him blurred. He stood, grabbed his coat, and left without locking the door. Hours later, he was on the first flight to Los Angeles. By the time he arrived, his phone buzzed with another alert. Young research assistant collapses during unauthorized trial organ failure suspected. The article had no photo, but the words might as well have been carved into his skin. He rented a car, drove through the night until the city lights vanished behind desert hills. When he reached the Purgene compound, guards stood by the gate, their badges flashing corporate logos instead of law enforcement. He flashed an outdated medical ID. Emergency consult, he lied. They hesitated, then waved him through. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and metal. He followed the faint sound of machines until he reached a locked door marked Containment Ward. Through the window, he saw her Ellie, pale, motionless wires trailing from her chest. For a moment, he couldn't move. The girl who had once lit up his sterile world now looked like a ghost inside it. "Ellie," he whispered, pressing a hand against the glass. No answer. He turned toward the nurse's desk. "Open it," he demanded. "You're not authorized," she stammered. He flashed his ID again, his voice steady and cold. "You think authorization matters when a human being is dying?" The door clicked open. He stepped inside, the sound of monitors filling the silence. He reached for her hand. It was cold but alive. "You found me," she murmured weakly, eyelids fluttering. "Of course I did," he said, his throat tight. "I should have never let you go." She smiled faintly. "I knew you'd come. You always do." He brushed her hair from her face, heartbreaking at how fragile she looked. For a moment, the world outside disappeared. But through the half-open blinds, he saw shadows moving, security approaching. He knew he had little time. As alarms began to flash red, Adrian Vale made a silent vow. He would save her again, even if it meant losing everything left of himself. Adrian moved through the sterile corridors of the Purgene facility, like a man possessed, the fluorescent lights flickering above him as alarms blared faintly in the distance. Every door he passed bore the same word, restricted, but he no longer cared. All that mattered lay behind him in that room, a girl hooked to machines because of the greed and cruelty of people who saw lives as data points. He found a terminal and pulled up the trial database, fingers flying over the keys. His old credentials still worked. What he saw made his stomach twist. The EC file contained dosage charts, timestamps, and a signature at the bottom, Veronica Vale. His ex-fiancée, now head of the corporate board. She had turned his medical foundation into a front for illegal trials, using his name to shield her crimes. The serum was labeled Project Genesis. Side effects: organ failure, neurotoxicity, hemorrhage. He shut off the monitor, rage and guilt colliding inside him. He had abandoned Ellie to save himself, and now she was paying the price. When the door opened behind him, he turned sharply, expecting guards. Instead, Veronica walked in heels, clicking softly on the tile. "I knew you'd come," she said, her voice smooth and cold. "You always had a hero complex. You used her." Adrian said, his voice low. "She was a lab assistant, not a volunteer. You injected her with an untested serum." Veronica smiled faintly. "Don't be dramatic. She signed a contract. You forged it," he snapped. "She was desperate and you exploited that." She tilted her head. "You're one to talk. You took in an 18-year-old girl and let the world believe you slept with her. You think anyone will see you as her savior?" His jaw clenched. "I don't care what they think. I care that she lives." "Then sign the transfer," Veronica said, sliding a tablet toward him. "Admit liability, take the blame for the experiment, and I'll release her for treatment. Otherwise, she dies here and no one will ever know why." He stared at the screen. It was a trap. Signing would destroy any chance of proving her guilt, but refusing meant Ellie's death. For a moment he saw her lying in that bed, pale and still, the glass heart pendant resting over her chest. He took the stylus and signed. Veronica smiled, taking the tablet back. "Still predictable," she said. "You never learned that love is weakness." "No," he said softly. "It's what makes us human." As she turned to leave, he lunged, snatching the tablet and throwing it to the floor. The screen shattered. "You're done," he said. "I backed up everything. The data, the contracts, the patient records. They're already uploading to the FDA server." For the first time, her composure faltered. "You wouldn't. You turned my foundation into a crime scene. You destroyed lives for profit. You think I'll let that stand?" She reached for her phone, but he grabbed her wrist. "You always wanted control, Veronica. You never understood what healing meant. It's not about power. It's about sacrifice." He let go, stepping back. "You wanted to test humanity. Consider this your result." He turned and ran, alarms screaming louder now. Security flooded the corridor as he sprinted toward the containment ward. Ellie was awake but weak, her lips, pale eyes barely open. "Why would you come back?" she whispered. "Because I can't lose another heartbeat," he said, attaching portable monitors to her chest. "We're getting out." "You'll get caught," she said faintly. "Then we'll go down together." He disconnected her from the machines, carrying her in his arms. The hallway filled with shouting and flashing lights. Smoke began to pour from the far end. Veronica, desperate to destroy evidence, had ordered the files burned. Flames spread quickly through the paper storage room, the scent of chemicals thick in the air. Adrian coughed, tightening his grip on Ellie. "Hold on." "Always," she murmured. He found the emergency exit blocked, but years of surgical training had taught him precision under pressure. He spotted a maintenance shaft, pried it open with a crowbar, and lowered her inside. She clung weakly to his shirt as he climbed down. The metal burned under his palms, but he didn't stop. "Stay with me," he said. "You're doing great." "You sound like you're talking to a patient," she whispered. "You are my patient," he replied. "My favorite one." Her faint laugh was the only thing keeping him moving. They reached the lower tunnel, where emergency sprinklers hissed above them, drenching everything in mist. His arms ached, his lungs screamed, but he refused to let go. At last they burst through a back door into the night air. He laid her on the damp grass beside the access road sirens wailing in the distance. "Adrian," she said, her voice a breath, don't let it end here." "It won't," he promised. Pressing his hands against her chest, feeling the faint flutter beneath his palms. "I've got you." Blue and red lights flickered across the field as government vehicles pulled up. FBI agents stormed the compound shouting orders. Veronica was dragged out screaming, her designer dress stained with soot. "You'll pay for this," she shrieked. Adrian didn't look up. He focused only on the heartbeat under his hands. "Stay with me," he whispered again. "Please, Ellie." A paramedic knelt beside him. "We'll take her from here, sir?" "No," he said, voice breaking. "I'm her doctor. You're also bleeding." The medic said, pointing to the gash on his arm. Adrian ignored it. He felt her hand twitch against his. Her eyes fluttered open. "You're here," she murmured. "Always," he said. The medic smiled faintly. "She's stable. You saved her." Adrian exhaled, his shoulders trembling. The adrenaline drained from his body all at once, leaving only relief and exhaustion. As they lifted her onto the stretcher, she reached for his hand. "Promise me something," she whispered. "Anything. Don't stop saving people, even when it hurts." He nodded, squeezing her fingers. "Only if you promise to keep living." "Deal," she breathed, before slipping into unconsciousness. He watched the ambulance drive away, the glass heart pendant catching the light as the doors closed. Behind him, the fire raged, consuming the last traces of corruption. In that moment, Adrian Vale knew the price of innocence, the cost of a single wrong number that had rewritten both their fates. Smoke still clung to the dawn sky as fire trucks circled the burning remains of Pure Jean, their sirens distant under the hum of chaos. Adrian Vale sat on the curb with blood on his sleeve and ash streaking his face, watching paramedics rush Ellie Carter into the emergency van. He couldn't feel the gash on his arm or the heat blistering his palms, only the hollow terror that came with realizing how close he'd come to losing her again. "You need medical attention," an agent said, kneeling beside him. Adrian barely heard. His eyes followed the ambulance as it sped down the hill, lights flashing red through the haze. He stood abruptly. "Where are you taking her?" "UCLA Medical," the agent replied. "You can't go yet, doctor. We need a statement." "Then you'll get it in the car," he said, already walking away. His voice carried authority, the kind that left no room for argument. Within hours, he was at her bedside, the sterile scent of disinfectant mixed with smoke that clung to her hair. She was alive, intubated, but breathing. Machines beeped rhythmically, and for the first time, he realized how beautiful that sound was. He sat beside her, speaking softly, as if she could hear. "You made it, Ellie. You're safe now. You did nothing wrong." When her fingers twitched against his hand, something in him broke open. Years of fear, guilt, and restraint dissolved into a quiet, burning resolve. He was done hiding. That night, while the FBI combed through the wreckage of Pure Jean, Adrian gave his full statement: every illegal trial, every forged contract, every secret Veronica Vale had buried under their shared past. His testimony made headlines within hours. Whistleblower surgeon exposes billion-dollar scandal. But fame was the last thing on his mind. He returned to the hospital every day, sitting beside Ellie as she healed. When she finally woke, her voice was fragile. "Did we make it out?" He smiled faintly. "Barely. You burned the devil's kingdom down." She blinked slowly. "You're bleeding. Old habit," he said. "I forget to take care of myself when I'm saving someone else." She tried to smile, but tears slipped down instead. "I thought I was going to die." "Not while I'm around," he said softly. "You promised me that once." She stared at him for a long moment. "Why risk everything you already lost your career because of me?" "Because losing you would have been worse," he said simply. She looked away, her throat tightening. "I never wanted you to get hurt. You didn't. You reminded me what it means to feel alive." Days turned into weeks. The trial against Pure Jean began. Veronica pleaded guilty to multiple charges of fraud, human experimentation, and endangerment. She faced decades in prison. When asked for comment, Adrian refused interviews. "The only story that matters," he said, "is the one that ends with the victims alive." Ellie testified briefly, her voice steady, though her hands trembled. When she finished, she saw Adrian in the back of the courtroom, standing silently, pride flickering in his eyes. Afterward, they walked outside together. The sun was setting over the courthouse, the sky painted in fire and gold. "What happens now?" she asked. "I start over," he said. "Build something honest this time. And me, you live, you finish what you started." She smiled faintly. "Nursing school." "Among other things," he said. "You've got the heart for it." "A broken one," she murmured. "Broken things let light through." His words lingered like an unspoken promise. That night, a fire broke out at the evidence storage unit, an attempt by one of Veronica's remaining associates to erase proof. When Adrian heard, he didn't hesitate. The firefighters were still fighting the blaze when he arrived, ignoring the police, shouting for him to stay back. He rushed inside, coughing through smoke and heat, searching for the sealed drive that held the patient list. Flames roared like a living beast, devouring everything in their path. He spotted the metal cabinet, half melted against the wall, pried it open, and grabbed the scorched drive inside. As he turned to leave, a beam collapsed, pinning him down. Fire spread toward the oxygen tanks. He closed his eyes, certain it was the end. Then, through the crackling, a voice shouted his name. Adrian Ellie burst through the haze, wearing a respirator, eyes fierce with determination. "Are you insane?" she yelled. "You shouldn't be here," he gasped. "Neither should you," she said, pulling at the beam with all her strength. Together they pushed until it rolled aside. She helped him up, coughing. "You said you were done saving everyone." "You're not everyone," he said. "You're the reason I stopped being afraid." She grabbed his face, forcing his eyes to hers. "Then prove it, get out." They stumbled through the smoke, the fire swallowing the walls behind them. When they burst into the cold night air, she collapsed into his arms, shaking. "If you ever run into another burning building," she said between breaths, "I'm breaking your legs." He laughed weakly. "Deal." The drive in his hand still glowed faintly from the heat. He looked at her face, streaked with soot and tears, and realized the fire hadn't destroyed him, it had purified him. The fear that ruled his life for years was gone. For the first time, he felt clean free. Later, as firefighters doused the last embers, he turned to Ellie and said, "If I die tonight, at least I touched life, and it was you." She pressed a trembling hand against his chest. "You're not dying tonight," she said. "You've got too much to fix." He smiled. "Then we'll fix it together." The night closed around them, silent but alive, two survivors standing amid ashes that smelled not of loss, but of rebirth. The sun rose over Los Angeles with a gentleness that felt almost foreign, soft light, spilling across the hospital wing where Adrian Vale lay, in a bed he hadn't intended to occupy. His arm was wrapped in bandages, his lungs ached from the smoke, but his eyes were open, fixed on the window where light cut across the sterile white walls. The room was quiet, except for the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. A sound that once haunted him now felt like proof that he was still here. He turned his head and saw Ellie asleep in the chair beside him, head-tilted strands of hair falling over her face. Even in exhaustion, she looked alive, fragile, yet fierce. He watched her for a long time before whispering, "You shouldn't have run into that fire." Without opening her eyes, she murmured, "Then you shouldn't have started it." Her voice was hoarse but playful. He smiled weakly. "You always did ruin my perfectly good plans." "You're welcome," she said, eyes still closed. "Next time, maybe save people from a distance." "Next time I'll save myself the trouble," he said, though they both knew he wouldn't. She opened her eyes, then gazed soft. "You never change." "Maybe I finally did," he said quietly. "Maybe I learned that touching life doesn't mean losing it." She sat up, stretching. "You mean me, don't you? You're the only person I've ever touched who didn't disappear." Tears welled unexpectedly in her eyes, and she looked away. "That's because I refused to." "I noticed," he said. "You always had more courage than I did. You had more to lose," she whispered. "And you lost it all for me." "No," he said gently. "I lost everything for the wrong reasons. long before you came. You reminded me why it's worth having something to lose again." She reached for his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and sure, no hesitation. The fear of touch that had haunted him for years was gone. There was only peace, a fragile, steady peace that came from survival. In the weeks that followed, his name returned to the headlines, but this time not as a scandal. Whistleblower Dr. Clears. His name exposes billion-dollar crime. The medical board reinstated his license, though he declined to return to Vail Medical. He had no desire to rebuild an empire. Instead, he used what remained of his fortune to start a small foundation for underprivileged patients. Free clinics staffed by volunteers. He named the first one the Carter Clinic. When Ellie found out, she marched into his temporary office waving the brochure. "You didn't ask me. I didn't think I needed your permission to honor you," he said with a smirk. "I'm not dead," she replied, crossing her arms. "Exactly," he said softly. "That's the point." She tried to stay angry but couldn't. She laughed, shaking her head. "You really don't know how to stop giving, do you, only when it's you," he said. Over the following months, she enrolled in nursing school with the scholarship he set up, though she insisted she'd pay him back one day. He didn't argue. He just smiled the way he always did when she said something impossible but true. On the anniversary of the fire, they visited the remains of the Pure Gene site, now fenced off and overtaken by wild grass. The air smelled faintly of rain and soil. Ellie knelt down, placing a single white lily in the dirt. "For everyone who didn't get out," she said quietly. "And for the part of me that almost didn't." He stood beside her, hands in his pockets, the wind ruffling his hair. "You saved more lives than you know," he said, "including mine." She looked up at him, the glass heart pendant glinting against her throat. "You always say things like that, and I never know what to do with them." "You don't have to do anything," he said. "Just be here." They stood in silence until the clouds parted and sunlight broke through, lighting the field like gold. Later that day, they returned to the clinic. It was small but alive, children running through the halls, volunteers laughing, patients smiling. Adrian watched as Ellie knelt to comfort a little boy, afraid of needles, showing him how bravery looked when spoken softly. She caught him watching and rolled her eyes. "What, you're a natural," he said. "You're biased," she teased. "Completely." That night, after closing hours, they stood on the roof of the clinic, the city lights twinkling below. She leaned against the railing, wind in her hair. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The fame, the power, the headlines." "Not for a second," he said. "I used to think success was about how many people knew my name. Now I think it's about how many lives I can hold without breaking them." "You mean touch without fear," she said. He smiled. "Exactly." She looked down at the city, her voice soft. "You know, I used to think love was something people like us couldn't afford, but maybe it's the only thing that's free." He turned toward her, the distance between them closing like a breath. "Ellie," he said, his voice unsteady, but sure, "I spent years thinking love made me weak. But then you showed me it's the only thing that makes me human." She met his eyes, tears reflecting the city's glow. "You're not scared anymore." "Not of you," he said. She smiled a trembling, radiant smile and reached up to touch his cheek. He leaned in, and for the first time their lips met, slow, tender, inevitable. The world didn't fall apart. It felt like it finally made sense. When they pulled back, she laughed through her tears. "You realize we're both terrible at normal. Then we'll redefine it," he said. They stayed there until, The stars faded, two broken souls mended by the same light. By morning, the first patients were already arriving, and the clinic came alive again. Adrian stood at the entrance as Ellie handed out charts, her smile brighter than the dawn. He thought of the man he had been, the surgeon, who refused to touch the coward hiding behind perfection, and realized that man was gone. What remained was someone simpler, humbler, finally alive. As he locked eyes with her across the busy corridor, he felt it again, the pulse that had started the night she called the wrong number. He whispered to himself, "You saved the man I used to be." And for the first time in his life, the words didn't sound like guilt. They sounded like grace. 2 years later, Boston had changed, but some places remained exactly the same. The Vale Community Health Center, formerly the Carter Clinic, stood at the corner of Dorchester Avenue, painted in soft cream and blue sunlight, glinting off the glass doors. Inside, the halls buzzed with quiet purpose, the kind that came not from wealth or power, but from care. Children laughed in the waiting area, volunteers passed charts, and on the second floor, a familiar figure walked through the corridor with a stethoscope draped casually around his neck. Dr. Adrian Vale was no longer the billionaire surgeon from the headlines. He was simply a man doing what he was born to do, heal without fear. His step slowed when he saw her. Ellie Carter, now 20 years old, in scrubs embroidered with her name, stood in front of a classroom of nursing students explaining how to check vital signs with a patience that seemed infinite. Her hair was shorter now, her smile steadier, but her voice still carried that same warmth that once pulled him out of darkness. He leaned on the doorframe, watching her for a moment. "Dr. Vale," she said, without looking up, sensing him instantly. "You're distracting my students." "I was testing their focus," he replied, smiling. "Seems they passed." She turned, mock glaring at him. "You're supposed to be resting. You've been in surgery all morning." "And you've been teaching all morning," he countered. "So maybe we're both terrible at following orders." The students laughed quietly as she rolled her eyes. "Class dismissed," she said, waving them off. When the last student left, she turned back to him, her tone softer. "You shouldn't keep doing so much alone." "Neither should you," he said, stepping closer. "But you still do." She crossed her arms. "That's different. I'm not a workaholic billionaire, trying to atone for the sins of medicine." "I'm retired from atonement," he said. "These days, I just try to make the world a little less broken." "And how's that going?" "Better now that you're in it." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You always say things like that." "Because they're true," he said. She looked down at her hands. "I got accepted into the University of California for the advanced nursing program. It's a year abroad. I wasn't sure if I should tell you." He paused, then smiled faintly. "You should go. You mean that you've earned it. You've given this place enough light to last a lifetime. It's time to shine somewhere else, too." She bit her lip. "What if I'm not ready to leave?" "Then you'll come back," he said. "This isn't goodbye, it's just distance. You sound so calm about it." "Because I know something I didn't before." "What's that?" He reached out his hand, brushing hers, slow and deliberate. "That love isn't about holding on. It's about giving someone enough strength to fly." Her eyes glistened, tears threatening to spill. "You're terrible at goodbyes. That's why this isn't one," he said. "We're just starting another chapter." She smiled, then stepped forward, resting her head lightly against his chest. "You always know how to make me believe in things again. That's because you taught me how," he whispered. They stood like that for a long moment, the hum of the clinic soft around them, the smell of antiseptic and coffee mingling in the air. When she finally pulled back, she looked up at him with a small smile. "Dr. Vale, do you still believe touching ruins you?" He met her gaze, eyes warm and steady. "Not anymore. Sometimes it saves you." She nodded, then glanced toward the window where sunlight spilled across the city streets. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. "The phone call every day," he said, "because it taught me the simplest truth, which is sometimes the wrong call leads you to the right heart." Her breath caught at the words. "You should write that down." "Already did," he said, pulling a folded note from his pocket. "It's engraved on the dedication plaque in the lobby." She laughed through tears. "You did not. Go see for yourself." They walked together down the hall, past patients and nurses who smiled as they passed. In the lobby, the new bronze plaque shone beneath the morning light. It read, "For Ellie Carter, who reminded us that healing begins with compassion and that no life is too small to save." She traced the letters with her fingertips, her throat tightening. "You didn't have to do this." "I did," he said softly, "because everything I am now started with a girl who refused to give up." She turned toward him, her eyes shimmering. "You know, the first night I met you, I thought you were the coldest man alive." "I probably was. Now you're just warm enough to be human." "Progress," he said, smiling. She laughed and slipped her hand into his. "So what happens next? Whatever you want," he said. "You've earned your future. And I'll be here doing what I do best, waiting for the next wrong number." She laughed again, the sound light and bright. They stood together beneath the soft glow of the clinic lights. The weight of the past finally lifted. Outside, children played near the fountain, their laughter spilling through the open doors. The city moved on, unaware that two lives had rewritten themselves within its quiet corners. As she leaned her head against his shoulder, the world seemed to pause. He felt her heartbeat against his arm, steady and real, and knew that this was what peace felt like. Not an ending, but the right touch at last. Sometimes a story ends quietly, not with a kiss or a promise, but with a small moment that lingers inside your chest, long after the screen fades to black. If you're still here watching the light in their clinic, hearing Ellie's laughter echo down the hall, maybe something in you understands what this story was really about. It wasn't about a billionaire or a miracle. It was about the courage to reach out again after life teaches you to fear touch. It was about the difference between saving someone and truly seeing them. In a world where people scroll past pain, where love is often replaced by convenience, their story reminds us that compassion still matters, that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change the entire course of another person's life. Maybe you've been where Ellie was desperate and unseen, dialing a number you weren't sure anyone would answer. Maybe you've been where Adrian stood, successful, but hollow, terrified to feel anything real again. We all carry versions of them inside us, the part that wants to be saved, and the part that finally learns how. If this story made you stop and feel even for a second, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, because someone out there might need the reminder that redemption is real, that no mistake is too big to unlearn, and that healing sometimes arrives disguised as a stranger's voice on the other end of a wrong number. Tell me in the comments, have you ever met someone who changed the way you see love, someone who helped you believe that touch can heal instead of hurt? I want to know your story. You'd be surprised how many hearts begin to mend just by reading what others have survived. If this story found its way to you tonight, maybe it was meant to. Maybe you were supposed to remember that no matter how cold the world feels, there's always one person, one word, one act of mercy that can start the thaw. And if you believe that love still saves, that kindness can still rewrite the ending, then stay a little longer with us. Subscribe not because the button matters, but because stories like this do. Every week we tell another one. About people who break and rebuild and learn to love again. Because that's what Emma's Stories is, for a place where broken hearts don't stay broken forever. A place that whispers what life sometimes forgets, to say you are still worthy of love. And if you ever feel lost, remember what Adrian told her in the end. Not anymore. Sometimes touch doesn't ruin you. Sometimes it saves you.